Hello YouTube, XCity here. We are continuing our pentest series today with a video on enumeration. In the last video we got access to the internal network by getting a root shell on Web 01, which has a lag in the external and internal networks. There's a lot of work to be done before we continue exploiting stuff on the domain, so let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to reconnect to Web 01 with the SSH key we got last time, and we're going to spawn a SOCKS proxy. So let's do that. And now I have this endpoint in my proxy chains conf here, this one, and we can, in theory, scan the network by using nmap and proxy chains. You would do it like this, proxy chains, nmap, and then just scan away, right? And hope you get a couple hosts back. And this is totally possible. You can do it like that. It's just slow. And if you don't want to have it that slow, we can use a static compiled nmap binary and use it on Web 01 directly. So there's this repository here by Andrew D, and he has some of the, I guess, more common Linux binaries in static versions, including nmap. I downloaded this one. Let's find a place here to put our stuff. For example, here, just create something unsuspicious like this one. And then let's get the nmap binary. Right, here we are. And now we can do the scan again. Same command, really. So we can do that and it won't take too long. Here we are, it's done. So let's look at the results. All right, if you use the -v option, you get it in verbose mode and you see the ports as they are being discovered. That's useful if the scanner's taking long. So I did it here. But we also got like the full result already. 1 and 2 is infrastructure. They're not relevant for the lab. And here we have one machine, one Windows machine. This is probably a Linux machine, has SSH, but no 445. No Windows machine, but also has SSH. That's interesting. What do we have here? This looks like a Linux web server, so we keep that in mind. Here we have a Windows box, Linux server, Windows box, another Windows box with a web server. This is a domain controller because it has 88 open. Here's another domain controller, which also has port 80 open, which is, I guess, not the most common thing on a DC, but we will see what this means later on. And one last host here. So that's quite the interesting result. So you definitely want to save that. In general, I won't show too much note taking here because, you know, everyone should kind of have their own methodology for note taking. And I don't want to waste time on it, right? Let's continue. We got a couple of ports, that's good. One other thing we can do, we can run TCP dump to listen at network traffic. And if you are like for the first time in another network, I think that's always like a good thing to do. Just listen and see what kind of traffic is going around. Maybe there's like a clear text thing or anything really that's interesting to us and tells us more about the network. So the way I'm going to do that is with this command. What we're doing is we're listening on the internal interface, which has the lag in the .11 network here, right? We tell it to not have a size limit. We want everything. And then we're going to put it into a pcap file, but also read it back. The reason I do this is so that we can see some traffic here while it writes the pcap file. All right, that's enough for now. Doesn't look like anything interesting happened here. We got the pcap file, so let's grab that one. Like this, just with SCP. Then we can have a look at it. And the main traffic here seems to be web post requests to this IP. And this is the SEAM system in the lab. So it's not in scope for testing, but we can see that it's basically sending logs to the theme. And if we just scroll here, other than that, there doesn't really seem to be much here. And that's already it. So nothing there, but I think it's always worth checking out. Another thing we could do, but I won't do here because the network is fairly small, we could use something like Aquatone to like go to all hosts and make screenshots of the web apps. If it's like a big network, that really helps to identify targets that are like more interesting than other ones. We can just do it manually here for now. So let's have a look at this website. And that's just a default page. But remember, it's on the domain controller. And whenever that happens, unless they've made some kind of website really on the domain controller, it's probably a CA. So to check if it's really one, you can just go to serve here. And it's asking for credentials. So this is indeed the CA of the domain. Let's look at the other ones. There was one here. It's also a default page. We could also try the same thing here. Maybe that's also CA. And indeed, that's also one. So there are 2 CAs already on this network. And let's see, there's one more here, but that's the theme system. And that's it for web applications, I think. So there isn't much web in here. And of course, I only scanned like part of the ports here, right? What you want to do is like do a full port scan on the network. I'm not going to do that here because it takes a lot of time, but you definitely want to do a full port scan. So the next thing we want to do is remember that we got a couple of credentials from the emails, right? Let's scroll up a bit here, these. It certainly makes sense to just try them on the domain to see if any of these email passwords are actually domain user passwords. So let's do that. I'm going to make a user.txt here with all the names from the emails, but without the domain. And also a pass.txt, which has all the passwords in the same order I wrote the usernames in. So let's save them as well. And now we want to spray that. So how are we going to do that? We're going to use proxy chains. -q for silent. Then we run crackmap exec SMB. Give it the word lists. No brute force, we just want to try the credential pairs. And we want to continue in case it found something. So let's try that. And you might be wondering why I'm not like doing the whole network and only the one host. But it doesn't really matter which host you authenticate to, right? If it's a valid domain credential, it will just work on any host, like to connect to SMB, for example, and list the shares. And yeah, you can see for most users it didn't work, but for one it actually does. And this is really, really useful. So now we have a valid credential pair for the domain and can do a whole lot of enumeration without even like being on one of the domain machines yet. So the next thing I want to do is I want to run Bloodhound. Let me see how I can do that best here. Open another window. I'm just going to move the web server one a bit away here. Do it like this. Okay. The first thing we have to do if we want to run Bloodhound here, we want to set up DNS chef. The reason is that it can't resolve DNS through proxy chains via UDP. So we are just going to set up a fake DNS server, and I'm going to use it like that. Let me just show you the page quickly. So that's the project if you want to check it out here. So what it's doing is it's replying to every DNS request with this IP we specify here. Why this one? Well, we said it's a domain controller. Just from this output, we don't know which one is the domain controller for exactly this domain, but if you do like a full scan with version everything, you will know. I just didn't do it here because of time reasons. And basically all requests to shinra-dev.vl will be responded with this IP. Which is perfect for Bloodhound because it basically wants to know DNS entries from the DC. So let's do that. All right. And now we can run the Python version of Bloodhound like this. It's collection method all, which you always want to use. I just put the credential here, the domain and the DC. There's actually a host entry for me here to the IP you see down below here. So the only other thing we tell it is the name server, which is our DNS chef server we just set up here. So let's run it. And you can see that it's doing a couple of queries here against the DC, and it's always responding with the same IP. That's not perfect, but it is enough to like get the data for Bloodhound. All right, it's done. Let's see what kind of output we got. And yeah, we got users, groups, domains, and computers. So let's try to actually import these into Bloodhound. You can see this database is completely empty. So here we go. All right, that looks good. Now we got, let's see, it says 0 users. Maybe something went wrong. Just refresh it once. This hardly looks like 0 users. Maybe now, yeah, it's populated. It has 36 users. So a lot of stuff going on here. The first thing we can really check is the user we just got, the only one we have. So we can mark this one as owned and then try to get some information here. Let's see. He is in IT, so that's an organizational unit here. Nothing else really interesting. We can list the groups here too. It's IT and domain users. Let's see a bit more. Usually interesting is outbound object control. So does this user have control over anything? But he doesn't. It's just like he's a domain user and he's an IT. We get the same information again, basically, right? We can't really see much more here. Now let's go to the custom queries here. One thing that's always interesting is like, who are the domain admins? Administrator, of course, that's the default one, but there are also 2 other ones, Kenneth and Shane. Let's look at trusts. There's actually a second domain here, and there's a trust. So this is already telling us that we are dealing with 2 domains here. And if we like go here, we can see Shinra VL is trusted by Shinra Dev. So Dev is trusting VL. This means basically, we don't have the details about the trust yet, but that users from Shinra can access Shinra Dev, but Shinra Dev can't access Shinra. And we will see that a bit later. You can really try them all if you want to. Kerberoastable accounts is interesting. There's a service account here, mfile svc. That sounds interesting. There's also the query for AS rep roastable accounts, but there's nothing coming back, so there aren't any. Also, shortest path to high value systems is always interesting. This domain we are in. And this gives a really big attack path back, I guess. So we have to like spend a bit here to unwrap it. Just see if we can make this a bit less confusing. It's actually hard to see. We can see there's this Molly user, which is a backup operator. And backup operators basically can get domain admin by like doing stuff on the domain controller. So this user is definitely interesting. Kenneth we saw is already a domain admin. Same with Shane. What else can we see here? Well, that's the DC. Obviously high value. And there's this file 01 here. And we can see that file 01 has a generic write on the DC. This is pretty unusual. This seems like a misconfiguration. And we can also see here that generic write is basically allowing us to write non-protected attributes. So usually you exploit this like with resource-based constraint delegation, or you set an SPN on Kerberoast the account, but this makes no sense for the DC. So the only thing we could really do here if we were to compromise file 01 is resource-based constraint delegation. And other than that, there isn't really that much here. So while there's a lot of output, there isn't really anything we can use right now. So let's continue. We probably want to check out this Kerberoast thing we saw, just to make sure it's not a false positive. And if it is not a false positive, we might be able to like get a hash and crack it. So let's try that. Get user SPN's SDM packet script to do it. We have to give it the credentials again. Let me see where I have the password here. And selling has no entries found. So there's something funky going on here. Bloodhound thinks it's Kerberoastable, this tool thinks it's not. So we come back to this. For now, let's do a bit more enumeration. What we can do is we can look for company shares. This is always interesting, right? If the company has a share that's accessible by every domain user and there's some like sensitive files, we already have a quick win. So let's do crackmap exec here as well to find shares. Just like this. Now we basically have to give it a range of IPs. We want to like check for shares on all the systems. It would be even better if you make like a list of only the Windows machines here, but I'm just going to give it the full range. Starting at 3 because 1 and 2 are infrastructure machines. So let's look at what we got here. There's client 01, not really any non-default share here. There's the DC. This also like confirms we're dealing with a CA. Remember, this one had a web server where we found the login. There's this client, which has a workspace. That's kind of interesting. That's unusual and custom. And there's also file 01, which has a shared called Shinra. And also the permissions are not that uninteresting, right? There's a workspace. So here we can actually write, but on Shinra we can only read. So let's, I guess, actually connect to the shares and check them out. Let's do it like that. We use the SMB client, the DC IP, and then we connect to 50, which is this machine here, right? It's the file server. Just to check out if there's anything on the company share. There's, I guess, use Shinra, ls, and there's info.txt here. So let's grab that one just to see if anything is there. Exit. There's a cat. Okay. So there's not really anything there, but it's still nice to check out. And there was also this other share here. We also want to check out this one where the workspace was. So let's go to 13. Oh no, we also, that was wrong. This was the DC IP. We want to go to 13 here. All right, let's look at the shares. There's workspace, so let's use workspace, ls, and there's a workspace.txt. Let's check out this one as well. Shared development workspace. So we didn't really get anything from that, but it's still a really useful thing to do. Okay, let's continue. Let me actually close this DNS tool. I don't need it anymore. Another thing we can check for is SMB signing, also with crackmap exec like this. We give it again the range, and we want to check basically which hosts in the network have SMB signing disabled. If we were to find any, this would mean that we can actually relay authentication to it. And if we can somehow coerce some user to authenticate to us, we could relay its authentication to the target machine which has SMB signing disabled. Actually, the output is pretty interesting. We can see that a couple of machines here have signing false, at least according to the output. This would be potential targets to relay authentication to. And I think this is like most of the Windows machines in the subnet. But let's wait a bit. Yeah, it missed a couple ones, but you get the idea, right? You want to check this so you have potential relay targets. And yeah, it's giving us the full list here. So all of these can be potentially relayed to. Okay, let's continue for now and just keep collecting information. Another thing we want to check out that crackmap exec allows us is we want to check for the machine account quota. I mentioned earlier in the Bloodhound output, there's a potential scenario for resource-based constraint delegation, which kind of requires us to create a computer account or already have one compromised. So it's always worth to check out. And here it's actually the default. Every domain user can create 10 machines or join 10 machines to the domain. So that's really useful if we have to create a computer account later on. So next I want to enumerate the CA a bit more. So we can also use crackmap exec for that. Really great tool, right? And we can just say module ADCS. And if we run that, it will show us the CA of the domain, which is this one here. Shinra dev CA. And we can also get a bit more information about it also, again, with crackmap.exec, like this. We also say -m ADCS, but then we give it like the server, which is like this output from here, right? The CN. Let's do that again. And it should show us the certificate templates. Here there are. Most of them are actually default, except this one, which has Shinra in the name. And this is already interesting, right? There's a code signing certificate. So maybe in the future, we can somehow sign our binaries if we want to. Well, maybe just quickly, what is the advantage of signing your binaries with the certificate from the domain? Well, it might be trusted then in various defenses, right? It might get past the AV, it might get around certain restrictions on Windows machines and so on. So signing code is probably useful. Now we are basically at the end of what we'll do with crackmap.exec for this video. But I want to dig a bit more at the certificates. So another thing we can use is a tool called CertiPy. So this tool is really useful to enumerate ADCS. There's a lot of like functions to get information, but also to exploit stuff. It's really useful, check it out. And we're going to use it throughout the lab as well. As I said, we want to do some more enumeration. So this time I'm using CertiPy like this. We use CertiPy find, we give it the credentials, we give it the domain controller and see what it comes back with. All right, we got some information here. And you can already see here, it's actually generating data that can be integrated into Bloodhound. And the version of Bloodhound I'm using here is actually one that was bundled with CertiPy, so it's compatible with it. All we really have to do now is to import this data. So it's the zip here. And now we got all the certificate data as well. If you go to analysis here, because I'm using this special version of Bloodhound, I have a lot of additional options regarding certificates. So we can also like get the certificate templates here. And yeah, here's our Shinra code signing certificate. So it's here as well. Let's only find the certificate templates that are enabled. It's a bit less. Still our code signing one here. Let's find misconfigured certificate. So the way these attacks on ADCS are named is basically by ESC and then a number. And this tool is able to check for all of them. So we can just basically click through them and see if anything comes back. And we actually get a hit here for ESC4. Let's see. There is a user here, Sally O'Connor, which is a member of certificate managers. And certificate managers, you can see that Philo1 also has a generic write permission on certificate managers. So it looks like Philo1 is really a special box where someone messed up. So Sally is in certificate managers, and certificate managers can write on code signing. Let's see if we get something here. It's actually not showing us the abuse instructions. Maybe there are none for the ADCS attacks, but there's a lot of documentation on them. I don't want to go like over the whole attack now. If we do it later on, we can like explain it then, I guess, right? Let's also go through the rest here. There's one more here, but this is only like the domain admin, so it's not too interesting, I guess. Nothing here. Well, this looks to be about it, what it can find. Yeah, and it has the same things here again, just because I added them to my Bloodhound config a while back. So this is it basically for the Bloodhound and ADCS enumeration part. And as you can see, we actually got a lot of information just from enumerating proper before exploiting anything. So let's clear that, and we are going to take that one step further. So the last thing I will count to the enumeration phase here is we are going to do some password spraying. We got credentials for a user, and we basically want to know on which machines he might have permission to log in. So we're going to use proxy chains WinRM in this case to see if he can WinRM to any machines. And yeah, from this output, it doesn't look like we have any luck here to WinRM to any of the machines with this user. So this is not too helpful. One other thing we can do, and this is actually helpful in this case, is to spray the same credentials against SSH. Because if you set up a Linux server, basically join it to the domain, you also have to like configure which groups or users have access via SSH, because by default every user has. And this is also a problem in this lab. So let's just spray it so I can show you. And you can actually see that to a couple of machines, this user actually has access to. Of course, it's only like low privileged access. At least we assume it at this point, right? We didn't try it. But there are a couple of machines we can actually log into. This just shows that it's always useful to like spray the credentials on the network. So detection-wise, can this be detected? Of course. A lot of things that we did just now could be detected. Really depends on the SOC and what they're looking for. On this lab, there's actually a seam as well to look for detections, but it only has the default rules, so there isn't like anything crazy custom going on at this point. But we can actually check it out, so let's do that. So here we are on Elastic. If we go to security and alerts, we get like the configured security alerts. But at this point, there doesn't seem to be anything here. Usually this is like full of alerts of people trying stuff. But at this point, it's still pretty empty. And we can also see the hosts and everything here. There are 11 hosts connected to the seam here. There's a list of them here. Usually, of course, as an attacker, you wouldn't have access to this, right? This is just me showing you how this network is monitored. And if we go to alerts, there's nothing yet here. Some failed authentications or whatever, but like it's not sticking out a lot at this point. Just because there were like no custom rules set up here and there are no actual operators monitoring this, right? So yeah, it's just to show you how this looks on the defense side. If we come to later videos and actually are using payloads on machines, you will see that the alert count might go up if we are not careful here. So this is it for the initial enumeration part. Detection-wise, like I said, these steps were not super stealthy, but this is just guessing, right? I'm not a SOC analyst. I just set this up so I can see the obvious stuff. Next time, we'll go over creating a payload that will actually get us a shell on Ashley's box, because remember, she's still waiting for this HR tool. We just spent some time enumerating before actually tackling this issue. So we'll do that on the next one. Thank you all for watching and see you next time.